you'll see a light in the top left that says I'm recording. Is that cool?
Yeah, I see that light.
Okay, cool. All right. So my first question to you, Walter, and thank you again for doing this. I am a huge fan of yours, going all the way back to, Chekov as well as Bester. So this is cool. I was curious, how were you inspired as a child? And one of the reasons I'm asking that is because what you said about Miss Rothman was amazing to me.
God, I loved her. Are you there? I think I've lost you.
You were freezing on my end too.
Let me
see something here.
It says this meeting is being recorded and it's continue is highlighted. Do I do anything with that?
No, you should be okay. Can you see me now?
I can see you. There is a window in front of you, but I see you.
Okay, all right. Yeah, I'm not sure which way the signal's working here. But so let me ask the question again about your inspiration as a child and Miss Rothman.
Well, she didn't inspire me to do anything other than the fact that she found me to be a worthwhile individual at a time when I was having a lot of self-doubt, and to have somebody in your corner like that was enormously rewarding. It made me feel a lot better about myself. And I was nuts about her. She was very pretty. She was my, I think, my 4th grade school teacher.
Why do you think you caught the acting bug?
Why did I catch it? It was practically a process of elimination. Initially I had thought that I would be an astronomer. And then when I was apprised of the amount of mathematics that were involved, I quickly discarded that idea. And then when I was 12, I entered into therapy. And I decided that a psychiatrist would sound like a really great idea, and one that I would be talented at, that I would do well at. I ultimately abandoned that as any kind of a panacea, and was really pretty much at sea through high school. I knew I had a capability for psychology. I didn't have to be a doctor. I could be a psychologist and not have to take all those organic science classes, physical science classes. However, at the same time, I was starting in the 6th grade and in the 10th grade and in my senior year of high school and my freshman year of college, I was being cast in the leading roles of plays that were being performed at the schools that I attended. And that was reinforcing, made me feel good about myself. At the same time, I thought a career as an actor was way beyond anything I could reach for. And, but I took one class at UCLA in my senior year, and my instructor, Arthur Friedman, was a very enthusiastic supporter and sat me down and said, look, you don't have a family to support. You don't have children. You are on your own. This is the time you give yourself a shot and try to do something that you're very good at, and that you may achieve some success. So he wrote a letter to the neighborhood playhouse, which is a drama school in New York, and they accepted me. And once I was there at the age of 22, after finishing college, that was it. I was hooked. Despite the pitfalls, the potholes, the ups and downs, the disillusionment, as well as the modest successes, I was hooked. This was going to be my life.
The stories you tell of your early acting roles in plays and on television, it's amazing to me how small and intimate really the acting world is, because you know, like you talked about working with Christopher Lloyd on the stage at an early age, and then of course you worked with him in Search for Spock later.
Right. I went to school with Chris. We went to the neighborhood playhouse together. We were best friends. He thought I was funny. You know, he's the guy that got all the laughs. But we had a grand time for the 2 years we went to school together. I was also classmates with James Caan and Dabney Coleman and Brenda Vaccaro and Jessica Walter and Elizabeth Ashley, all of whom became movie stars. So that was a pretty extraordinary class out of 70 people. Yeah, so I had some good people to learn from.
That's amazing to me. So obviously Chekhov is your role that people remember you for, and for good reason, because you were amazing in it. Talk about casting for that.
Well, you know, one can expound on life's ventures and the capriciousness of fate and all of that, and it would certainly my casting on Star Trek would be a good example, because I was only one of 2 people who they read for the role. Of course, no one knew that Star Trek would expand and endure for 6 decades, almost 6 decades, in the different iterations that it has. But that I was only one of 2 people that I only read once, and that there was no, usually when you're up for a series, you read for the casting director, then the director, and then the network of advisors, executives, et cetera, et cetera. And after a long, strenuous, arduous process and several callbacks, you might get the role, and in which case you deem yourself very fortunate. For all I knew, I was coming on for a couple of days worth of work, and that would be it. And Star Trek would be a list of rather insignificant roles that I had played on television over the course of 4 or 5 years while I was exercising my craft, and that would be it. Who knew? Who knew that that Star Trek would manifest itself into such an extraordinary phenomenon, that it would go on not only past our 3 years, but through 6 of our movies and 4 Next Generation movies, and I think 3 or 4 movies with the new group, as well as 5 other television series. It's just, it's just one of those things. I got lucky. And the reason why I think why I feel particularly lucky is because if I had to be identified and associated with one project for almost 60 years, I just as soon be Star Trek than anything else. Star Trek was, the creator, Gene Roddenberry, was a man of a socio-political conscience with which I am in accord. He was looking for a better world, a world where we could all get along, where humanity could address its differences in a peaceful manner, that we could learn to care for each other and live in a gracious world. And since we weren't living it back in the 60s, when we were dealing with Vietnam, and we were dealing with assassinations, and we were dealing with the horror that has never really left, we go on and on, taking one step forward and one step backward, it seems to me, that the show that said, if we endure, if we sustain, we can overcome. And there will be a time when all mankind can live together and care for one another. And that's what Star Trek was about. We haven't achieved it yet. We're still in there trying. But I think that was the most specific appeal that Star Trek had.
and I hope we get there in our lifetime. I really do.
You have better shot than I do.
I'm actually, I was born in 1966, so I am a Star Trek.
No, you're a kid. You're just a kid. You know,
What?
every old person says that. You know, I've fallen into that mode. I can't, I'm terrible with computers and electronics. I mean, I am the prototypical old guy who is a curmudgeon. Well, I'm not really a curmudgeon, but I grumble and I'm grumpy and I say, is that really me? Is that what I have become? And alas, it's true. This is an exception. Because there's a camera on you.
So you're telling me to get off your lawn? Is that what you're telling me?
You got it.
Why do you think Chekov never got the girl? I always wanted you to at least once.
I did. I got it 3 times.
Okay. Well. Okay. Well.
The apple, the way to Eden, and gun, and the gun.
Spectre of the Gun.
Spectre of the Gun. Yeah.
Yep. You're right. No, that's true. Yeah, but then let's see. You got shot. You got no.
Yeah, that's true. I got a lot of pain, a lot of torture. Whenever they needed somebody to, and the reason, if you're interested, because people ask me, why was it that Chekov seemed to be the one who was always being brought to a situation where there was peril, and the reason was, I'm quite sure, is because it was less undignified, youngest member of the crew to scream. You know, most youthful would be more likely not to have the discipline of a seasoned officer. So whenever they needed to delineate that jeopardy, Chekov was there to have something in his ear or to be burned or whatever else they might inflict upon him.
I love that. So at what point after the show was canceled did you realize, wait, there's something else going on here? This is not something that I did for a few episodes and it's going to be forgotten?
Well, you have to understand that I am by disposition severely cynical, and it's very hard for me to accept anything at face value and not to find the weakness or the flaw in whatever complimentary or any experience I have that is successful. So when Gene Roddenberry said we were done, and thanks for participating, I thought we were done. And then the following 9 years, we kept saying, we're coming back. No, we're not coming back. No, we're not. No. So we went on like that, and you build up after a while. You build up a disposition that says, don't get excited anymore. Forget about it. It's not going to happen. And where else can I apply whatever talent I might have? And that's why I started writing. Because the phone certainly wasn't ringing after 1969, and Star Trek was put on curfew. Actually, it was supposed to be canceled, but we only went on curfew. So we came back, and in 1978 or 79, and we did Star Trek, the movie, the motion picture. And literally, Jeff, it was the second shot before I believed we were actually doing this. The first shot was this sweeping, panning shot of the bridge where we were all at our stations. And we did that one, and I wasn't convinced that somebody wasn't going to yell, cut, that's it, goodbye. But then when we set up the second shot was George, Nichelle, and I rushing to the elevator. What was it called? It wasn't called an elevator. The lift, the turbo lift.
Turbo lift, yeah.
Yeah, and Captain Kirk steps out, and we set that shot up, and the lights were on us, and they were getting it all focused and in place. And we shot that shot. And I said, we're making this movie. Huzzah. We're making this movie. They wouldn't have Bill Shatner standing here paying him as much money as they're paying him if we weren't going to continue to make this movie. So I knew we were back. However, at the end of Star Trek I, I sat in the audience with the rest of the Star Trek cast in Washington, D.C. after a red carpet introduction to the film, all of us coming in limousines. And I watched that movie and my heart sank. There are people who now, with the passage of time, see things in it that I never saw, and I still don't see. But there's a patina that comes with age that applied to viewing the movie now. In any case, I thought we were done then. I was convinced Star Trek I was it. Goodbye, see you later. Now what do I do? Things were going on behind the scenes that I didn't know about. And by the way, there's a wonderful series of books called These Are the Voyages by Mark Cushman that document all of the travails that we had, not only during the series days, but during the 70s regarding Star Trek trying to reassert itself as an entity, as a presence. So Star Trek I was it. But when we did Star Trek II, I knew immediately this was an extremely well structured story. We had, and the most interesting and most important thing about it was, do you have time for me to do this? Talk about this?
Oh, please, that's why I'm here. And I'm loving every second of this.
Okay, the most important thing about the story structure was our villain was as powerful as our protagonist. And he wasn't a cardboard villain. He was a villain with human feelings. He was a villain who sought vengeance for the death of his wife. Now that's what we can identify with, feeling that kind of anger at the demise of somebody that we care about. So even as you booed and hissed him, you also could understand where he was coming from. And making him that dimensional makes the story that much more important. It's not like superheroes, where you have the costume heroes who can fly and they're up against mechanical creatures or animals or reptiles, whatever the hell they're up against. We had a genuine human being, a little overwrought human being, but certainly still one you could identify with. And Ricardo Montalban was so good in that role and played it so beautifully that the picture really had an enormous force. Plus the fact that we had that amazing death scene, Spock's death scene. Incidentally, just to cap that part of this conversation, I was given an advance copy of the script for Star Trek II, and no, strike that. Never mind. Let's go on. They'll come up if we talk about Star Trek. No, it was Star Trek II. Yeah, Spock dies in Star Trek II, right?
Yes, he does. Yes, at the end of Star Trek II.
Right. The advanced copy I got had him dying in the second act. You can't kill off Spock in the second act. That with Kirk and the Enterprise, those are the three entities that are synonymous with what Star Trek is. You think of those three entities. I called up the new producer, Harv Bennett, and who thought I was calling to ask to pad my role, and he was about to dismiss me, and I said, no, I'm not talking about acting. I'm talking about your script. You cannot do this story with Spock dying in the second act. It's got to be the climax of your story. So he took it to heart, and amazing to me that no one else had brought it up, because it seems to me as plain as the nose on your face that you have to have the theatrical, the theatrical dynamic of that event occurring at the curtain of your story.
Well, you were not in the original episode of Space Seed. I have to ask you about that.
Well, actually, that's not true. And let me see if I remember. Oh, yeah. I think the reason was because Chekov was actually on the third deck behind the boiler room, suffering from a terrible illness that had him ensconced in the bathroom for hours and hours. Well, poor Mr. Khan, his genetically engineered kidneys were pounding on the bathroom door, begging to be let in, until finally the door opened. Chekov stepped out, Khan grabbed him and said, "Your face, I will never forget." Okay? Yeah, I think that's the way it went.
Oh, I love that. That's awesome.
Yeah, I knew when I read the early draft of the script, I knew that Chekov wasn't in the Space Seed, but that was one aesthetic failing in the script that I chose to ignore, and I didn't mention that.
Let's talk about Star Trek 4 for a second, because you have some wonderful scenes in that movie. Yeah. Talk a bit about that.
Well, as soon as I read the script, I knew we had a hit. I thought 3 was like, if you remember back this far, when the 45 RPM records were released, there was a flip side. And the flip side was generally a fairly reminiscent of the front side, of the successful side of the record. The melody was similar. Well, I thought Star Trek 3 was similar insofar as that we were still seeking the bomb and the conflicts about that. So I wasn't as enamored of Star Trek 3. But Star Trek 4, I read the script and I said, wow, this has everything. This has humor. This has a very topical issue about the environment, which was what Star Trek had come to be known for, that we're dealing with issues of world significance. And the scenes were beautifully written. The scene with Leonard and Bill in the truck was hysterical. It was great fun. It was wonderful to see Mr. Spock in a situation where you could laugh with, and not feel uncomfortable about it. I had some nice things to do. We got to go on location and I had never done that. I'd never been in a footage film that was shot outside of a soundstage for Star Trek. And this was so we actually went down there up there to San Francisco, and we shot up there. Yeah, that was a terrific experience, and that is actually my favorite film.
And I can understand that. Talk to me about Star Trek 6. It seems to be the pattern that, the even movies are good. And the joke was at the time that Star Trek 6 should have been called The Apology, but we won't get into that.
I haven't heard that. What I've always heard was that 2, 4, and 6, the even numbered movies, were the good movies. I had a terrible time with Star Trek 6. Not because I didn't think it was a good story or well executed. I did. I thought it was very well done. But I really thought that was the end. That Star Trek 6 was the end. And I felt very disappointed and disillusioned that there weren't moments for the supporting actors that would be the punctuation we needed to end our characters. We were being used again in a way that we had been used during the series and in most of the films, simply to help advance the story, never to analyze or internalize what was going on. We never dimensionalized by the scripts. I say a few exceptions that I mentioned, and I really thought that we would get a curtain speech, so to speak, something that would say, this is who Chekov is about, this is who Sue's about, Uhura, and even Scotty. And that wasn't there. It was just another routine Star Trek story as far as the supporting characters were concerned. So I was angry throughout the whole shooting. And I don't know if anybody was aware of it because I kept it to myself. I didn't yell, I didn't complain, I didn't screech. But I felt sorely disappointed because this was absolutely, without equivocation, our last time we would ever do Star Trek, as far as I was concerned, you know, and we didn't get the send off I was hoping for.
Yeah, I would agree with that, actually. I mean, I like the film, don't get me wrong, and your scenes in it are terrific, but you're absolutely right. Signatures flying by at the end.
I think that was my idea.
Oh, I love that. That was wonderful. I was going to say that was beautiful to do that.
No. It was the one, my idea was the one we did for, I think it was Star Trek 4, when they showed us at the end little clips and with our name.
Oh, yes, yes.
That was my idea.
Okay, that was good too. Uh, so I want to talk to you about Babylon 5 for a second because I loved Bester. My understanding is when you went there, they had another role in mind for you originally.
Yeah, Joe Straczynski, who created, produced, and wrote almost every episode, knew my work. We knew each other casually. We were not close friends, but he had presented a role for me to do on the show in the first season, and I was thrilled to have that opportunity. However, about 6 weeks before we were supposed to start shooting, I had a quadruple bypass. I was at a convention in Chicago and I suffered a heart attack. And the first person other than my wife who I called was Joe to tell him I would not be available to shoot that episode when they had it scheduled. He replied in a way that just, if I hadn't been already prostrate, sorry, that's in a whole other situation, prostrate on the bed, I would have fallen down, because he said, we'll hold it, we'll hold the script. We won't shoot until you're ready. Well, they ran out of scripts. They had to shoot it. So it was a nice role. And somebody else did it extremely well, an English actor whose name I don't remember. And I thought, well, that was my shot, and that's the end of it. In every dark cloud, there's a silver lining. Not only did Joe come up with another character, but it became recurring. Instead of one episode, I did 12 over the course of 5 seasons. And I had a wonderful time. That was really great. I had people, it was already 15 years later. I wasn't the new kid on the block the way I was with Star Trek. The cast system of the 60s, involving actors who were regulars on shows, had changed. If you notice that shows began having all of the actors featured before this episode started, not some in the front and some in the back, So I was greeted with respect and with warm fellowship, and from everybody, from all of the cast, from the executives, from everybody. And if you want to read between the lines there, Bill Shatner, it wasn't always true on Star Trek. Nevertheless, no, not nevertheless. I love doing Babylon 5. I love the people that I work with. And I had a ball with that character, because every time Bester was involved, he was pivotal to the story. That really felt important.
Well, it was such a nice change to see you playing someone who was, they weren't really evil. They just weren't very nice. And you kind of like, oh, I want to boo you, but I love you at the same time. You did such a great job with that.
Well, thank you. I don't editorialize the character I play. I played hoodlums in a couple of shows. I never think of them as hoodlums. I never think of them as bad guys. When you do that, then what you're doing is imitating or mimicking the character. The whole idea is that you becoming so engaged with the character that you can talk his dialogue, but feel it personally. Feel justified in those lines. Because if you don't really believe it, then the audience isn't going to believe it.
That's a wonderful, I love that. How did Generations come about? Your cameo role?
Oh, yeah. Well, that was, of course, that was a surprise. Initially, we were all going to be in it, all 7 of us. And then Leonard and DeForest decided that it was a step backwards for them. And they, I'm trying to remember exactly, and they decided not to participate. Then they cut it back from the 7, and they decided that we were only going to have 3 original Star Trek members. And so they chose Jimmy Doohan playing Scotty and Walter Koenig playing Chekov, as well as Captain Kirk. The thing is, they didn't change the dialogue. The dialogue I had was all McCoy. I was in the infirmary. Is that what I'm trying to say? Infirmary, yeah. I was in there saying the lines that DeForest would have said. So I called up Berman, the producer, and said, "Thank you very much. I'm flattered that you would consider me, but this is not something that I feel I need to do or feel that it's not the character. It's not the character that I have known, and just for a payday, it's not worth whatever minute amount of integrity that I have. It wasn't worth losing that to do it. So I thought that was the end, and then they called me back and said, "Well, what will it take to get you involved? Not financially, but in terms of the story." And I told them. And I said, it's something that will not in any way infringe upon your plot, in any way subvert the story that you want to tell. But it'll be a moment between Chekov and Scotty after Kirk is blown out of the ship, where we lament his demise and where there's some real vulnerability. And I came in and they wanted to hear it in person. I told them, and the writer wrote it down. And I got the script. It was in the script. I got on the stage. It was still in the script. The director, who I thought was terrific. I mean, I guess there are people who didn't like that gentleman, but I thought it was because he really was involved. He really made a contribution. Most of the time, directors, particularly in television, directors are traffic cops. You know, okay, you move there, we're gonna do a dirty shot over your left shoulder. It's not anything to do with artistry. It's to do with technology or something. In any case, we shot that scene. I was very moved by it because I had just lost my brother, and that was very much on my mind when I shot the scene where Kirk, we lose Kirk. And the next day, the director came up to me, maybe this is why I like him so much. He said, "A+, Walter." And I thought that was great, thank you. And of course, it was cut out of the movie. Yeah, that's the way it goes. But I got to do it. And the people on the stage who were there, some of them were actually, there were tears on their cheeks. So it's one of those things where I personally had a sense of satisfaction. Whether or not the audience got to experience it is not necessarily as important as that I had an opportunity.
I would love to have seen that, and I'm sorry to hear that. Talk to me about you all got back together for an episode of Futurama, where you were all heads in jars. If you remember that.
What's wrong with that?
No, it was just wonderful. Could you talk about that?
Well, there's not that much to say. It was a delightful episode. I thought it was a fun idea. The chap who wrote it evidently had gone to many Star Trek conventions because he knew exactly what they were like and what the fans were like. But we did it separately. You know, we weren't in a room together when we did it. We acted it out separately. So I thought, you know, this is fun. It's not only Chekov that is in animated form, but Walter Koenig. They've animated Walter Koenig because I was myself in that as well. So you know, that was fun. I had a good time with that. I don't know what else there is to say.
Well, I just love how many people get to say they played themselves as a head in a jar. I just
hell, exactly. My God. In fact, I'm reeling now when I realize the profundity of that statement, and how significant it is in terms of all that's going on in the world at the present time.
Oh, yeah, good point. Well, that wasn't the last time you played Chekov. You've played him in some fan films. How did those come about?
Well, despite well, maybe not despite, but because of it, the moment that didn't occur in the Next Generations film, where we got to really see Chekov, a vulnerable human being Chekov, I always had that sense of a character interruptus. We never came to completion with Chekov. We never got to know who the inner man was. And when the first film was presented to me, it was a fan film, and it was about, it was a sequel to Deadly Years, in which, if you remember, in Deadly Years, the principal characters on the show, the principal cast, all aged rapidly, except for Chekov. And in this episode,
Yep.
Chekov suddenly began to age, and the young man who had been playing him prior to my appearance was still there, but he rapidly became me. So, and I had to contend with what this portended and the consequences, and that that's all the things that you go through. It's the bargaining, the denial, the anger. It's all the things that occur when you're faced with life and death circumstances. So I thought that would be fun to do, just fun to act in, and I did. I had a good time. Everybody was very reinforcing, and it was a pleasant experience. The other two, I guess I just wasn't done yet. I just wasn't done with Chekov. I still thought there was more to say, particularly as an older man, and so I agreed to do that with the stipulation that the last one, I think it was called Star Trek Renegades, that Chekov had to die. I had squeezed every ounce of life out of him, I thought, in these post-professional experiences, and I felt comfortable with the idea that we could lay him to rest, and they were in agreement, and that's what happened.
Talk to me about what was that?
Yes, we are going to get around to talking about the title of my book, aren't we?
Oh, we are, absolutely, yes. You're reading ahead on my questions here.
Okay.
I'm sort of going linear for you too. Talk to me about finding out your role has been recast in the 2009 J.J. Abrams film and meeting Anton.
I had no compunctions about that. I had no reservations about that at all. If you had asked me maybe 20 years before how I would feel to have my role recast, I might have reacted differently. But this was already, I suppose you say, 2009. This was a long time since we had done the role, and I was no longer right for the character. I was a much older man. I didn't know going in to watch the premiere how I would respond to the film in general, and whether there was some underlying hostility or anger that might surface as a consequence of being usurped by this new group of performers. To my delight, and I pat myself on the back about this, I felt very generous about the whole experience. I thought they were terrific. I thought they all did a wonderful job. I thought Anton was great. And I had met him, and he was a delightful young man. He was very, very bright and very gifted, and a terrible, tragic event that he passed away so young. But it was a fun thing for me to watch. I wasn't making any comparisons. I wasn't saying, well, he did it this way. I just enjoyed the film as if I had never seen a Star Trek production before.
Let's talk about your writing. So in the 70s, you wrote a screenplay for the animated series, which they were stupid to not have you on, I must say. And then you also wrote an episode of Land of the Lost, which I thought was one of the better episodes of that. And you wrote some other episodes for different shows as well. You mentioned earlier you went to writing. Why did you decide to go that route?
Out of desperation. When Star Trek was canceled in '69, I didn't have a destination. I woke up in the morning and I didn't know what I was going to do for the whole day. It's sort of like what we're experiencing now, with this pandemic. But it was far more depressing for me as a younger man. And I said, I gotta have some objective. I gotta have something to work toward, a raison d'etre, to get up and live my life. And I finally decided I'm gonna write a novel. And I knew I could do that without being dependent on anybody else. I didn't need to get the approval of a producer or casting director or anybody else. I could just do that on my own. So every day, this was after about 2 or 3 months of laying in bed and feeling sorry for myself, lying in bed and feeling sorry for myself. I got up, I generally went to the library because we had a baby at home. It was crying a lot. And I wrote in longhand for several hours each day. And while I was in the process, and I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I loved the feeling that even if I accomplished 2 paragraphs for the day, I felt like I had done something, that I had not wasted this day. But when I was writing it, I thought, with all this work I'm putting in, this has got to be published. This has got to sell. Otherwise, it will be all for naught. I didn't understand myself well enough to know that that wasn't accurate. What I discovered was when it was done, and it was very much approved by 2 science fiction writers who wrote for Star Trek, who thought I would be able to make a sale, but one who thought it was terrible. It was my friend Harlan Ellison, who wrote City on the Edge of Forever. He thought it was terrible. So on the basis of his condemnation, I put it aside. But what I realized was, that wasn't time wasted. That was time doing something constructive. That was time developing who I was and how I exercised my whatever talent I might have. So even though it didn't sell for 18 years, it was well worth the time I spent. Now the addendum is that it did sell 18 years later to a young editor who read it and somehow was able to communicate with what I had written. And so it was published and sold very few copies. And then, believe it or not, another editor, another young publishing company group of people read it, and they published it a second time. And again, probably sold in single figures for all I know. And then it was published a 3rd time. So I probably hold the record for the most publishers for one book that sold the fewest number of copies. But again, I love doing it. So.
Well, I was going to say you need to write more, period, because I love your biography. In fact, originally it was called Warped Factors, and then you updated it recently. And that's one of the reasons why I get to talk to you. Beaming Up and Getting Off, Life Before and Beyond Star Trek. I have to say, I felt like I really got insight into you and your life. It was very heartfelt, and you are a fantastic writer, honestly. What prompted you to essentially, I felt like you were talking to your therapist, I guess.
I probably was. The thing is, I didn't get a hell of a lot out of therapy. I got a lot more out of writing the book and the subsequent volume. It's true that's the way It's probably, that's, you know, now that you mention it, that's probably the process that I used is just, you know, I was candid with my shrink about what was going on. And I was pretty much candid to the reader as well as how my life has progressed and the pitfalls, the potholes, and the modest successes. So it was fun writing. It was fun writing the first time. And then when I was approached by Jacobs Brown to publish a sequel, I thought, well, I'm not doing anything else that is particularly stimulating, and this is a subject that I know well, so I think I'll do that. So yeah, so I wrote another. It's about a third the length of the first book, but it's all put together, and it's now available. Now that you mention, and I really don't want to. I don't want to leave this subject because this is obviously the purpose of this communication. But now that you mention it, being where we are again, you know, stuck at home, ensconced, with very little opportunity for stimulation, I started another novel. Hopefully this one will be better received. But it's a very complicated story, and it's an adventure for me to sit down when I do, and to live another life. And literally, I mean, the life I'm living at home is, you know, I watch a couple of hours of MSNBC during the late afternoon, and once in a while something on cable. But sitting at the computer and writing about these folks that I'm writing about, and what their travails and what happens to them, is very vibrant for me. Is whether I'm doing it well or not, you know, I will ultimately leave to someone else to decide. But I know that it is thoroughly engaging for me, and I feel like I've accomplished something at the end of each session.
Well, I'm a writer and an editor myself, so if I can help you in any way, let me know, please, because I would love to help you, and I would love to read more of your writing because, like I said, I was just so blown away by this update that you did. And I like the original warp factors too. I'm just letting you know that. One of the things I always find after one of my books gets published is there's a section in there I would always go, oh no, I can't believe I put that in there. I want to go back and pull all the copies and take that part out. Is there something in this memoir of yours that you feel that way?
That's an interesting question. You know, I've read it so many times that when they asked me to do a proofread, I sort of skimmed it, and I found a couple of errors. There was one page where instead of going to the top of the next page, it was a two-column page. They went to the right-hand column to finish the thought that I had started on the page before, and then they filled in something in the first column that was part of the book, but it wasn't part of the narrative at that juncture. And so that, you know, little things like that, where there was a couple of proofreading mistakes. One thing that I really feel bad about is I had Edward G. Robinson working in the 20s, and I realized before the book was published that he didn't start working until the 30s, and I thought I had conveyed that to the editor, but evidently it got lost somewhere. So there's little things like that happen 3 or 4 or 5 times. But what I would like to ask you, sir, is what kind of books do you write? Because I'm not familiar with them.
Oh, so my first book actually was a Star Trek reference book. It was a guide to all the novels that had been published up to that point, which at that time there was probably about 550 of them. Oh, so it was a guide to all the books, and it covered all the franchises. And then with me and another guy, we actually broke down a timeline year by year, putting the books in with the episodes of all the shows. It was 2.5 years worth of work. And I did that for CBS, actually.
Wow. Good for you.
Oh, well, thank
Good.
you. And I've written a couple thrillers now. I have a conspiracy novel that's sort of a sci-fi thriller about Galileo that my
Did you get it?
agent is shopping.
Is it published?
No, it was originally bought by a publisher, but they sat on it, so my agent got it back. So now she's shopping it again.
Okay.
And yeah, and I'm also writing reviews and articles for the Associated Press.
Oh, okay.
So
I
yeah,
hope they're
so
objective.
oh yeah, yeah. It's mostly reviews of books and mostly mystery, thriller, or history is my
Oh,
expertise.
great.
So
Good. If I suck up to you enough, maybe someday you'll review my new novel and you'll give it a good reading.
I would be honored to
Did
do that.
you-
Well, I did have so I want to know, why do you think Chekhov has inspired so many people and is so beloved?
Well, I don't know how many people that inspired. I mean, I know that Dr. McCoy inspired a lot of people, and Scotty inspired a lot of people to actually pursue careers in their fields, in medicine or as engineers. I met one person who learned Russian as a consequence of my performance and went to work for the State Department and was in fact a spy for the United States State Department involving the Soviet Union. So that's the only person I know that I actually inspired. Well, you know, I filled a category. I looked young. I had whether it was my hair or not, I had a lot of hair. Kids could identify with the character, thought he was groovy, and that was the whole purpose of bringing me aboard, was to find that segment of the population that we had not yet, that Star Trek had not appealed to as strongly as to other representative population. So, and that wasn't my mail. My mail was all from little kids, from young kids, 8 to 14. And so we succeeded in achieving that. And I, you know, I meet people all the time, ladies who are now in their 50s and 60s, who told me they had 60s or 70s maybe, told me they had a crush on Chekov when they were kids, you know. So we accomplished with that character what they had intended.
Besides this novel, which I'm dying to read, what is next for you?
Besides the inevitable death.
Well, no, we're not going to go there. No.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm 83 now. Who knows? My father was only 62, so I'm way ahead of the game. Anyway, and I'm in good health. There's no hidden agenda in my saying and joking about that. I'm in good health. I don't know. I don't know what's next. I don't know how many roles there are for 83-year-old men. So I don't know I have a new agent, but I don't know what the possibilities are on that score. We'll wait and see. I think this novel is going to take me a year. It's going to take me, it's very complicated with a lot of back and forth in time. And I'm writing it just between you and me. Don't tell anybody else. I'm writing it with the idea that it might be a long form television series. You know, I think long form is the appropriate definition in terms of that it could be like 6 episodes or 8 episodes, something of that nature. I'm writing it with that in mind, but I'm definitely writing it as a novel, not as a screenplay.
Well, that with all the options available now,
Yeah,
and with that would be great. Yeah, for sure. And why don't you write it as a screenplay, I guess, is my next question.
Well, I'm having more fun writing it as a novel because I'm using, a narrative that you usually don't employ when you're writing screenplays. You're to the point. You're not writing. Well, I'm not writing purple prose in any event, but you're not writing with a style particularly. You're writing, with instructions. It's an instructional kind of aptitude. Walter Hill, if you remember Walter Hill, the director. No, yeah. Well, he had his very specific style of writing that stood him apart from other writers, screenwriters, and was quite successful writing that way. But that just comes to mind. And mostly, you just want to execute the story, flesh out the characters and their relationships, and sort of create the atmosphere in a screenplay. There is more style involved, I think, in writing a narrative, in writing a novel. And I'm having fun with that. Whether it's good or not, I don't know. But remember Mickey Spillane?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. I haven't read Mickey Spillane in 50 years, but I think I'm writing a little bit like Mickey Spillane. I have that sense.
The more you tell me, the more I want to read this for sure. And my offer to help is 100%.
We'll definitely keep in touch.
My last thing for you is, can you give me a live long and prosper?
What do you mean? Do you want me to say that?
Yeah, and then do the, if you can.
Oh. Is that it? Do I have it?
I gotcha.
Wait, I can do it. That's it?
Yep, that's it.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Let me do one thing here real quick. I will stop